Our experts will now share their jewels of wisdom with you and future crowdfunders.
First of all, you always have to start from research. You cannot just run an advertising campaign and hope that someone would be interested. You need to learn about other campaigns on Kickstarter or other platforms. And you need to see, for example, journalists who was writing about it. You can contact them. You can communicate with people through social media. You definitely need to have your Facebook page. You need to talk about it. Also, this is a big misconception that crowdfunding is all about online business. I'm always telling people, go out, go talk to other people around you. Don't just talk to your friends, because they're always going to be supportive and they will be polite. Even if it doesn't worth anything, they wouldn't say it. Talk to the people, to complete strangers. It would help you, because if you cannot explain to them why they need it, maybe it's not a good product. So attend as many startup events as you can around you. Attend the industry events and just don't be shy. And many people are interested in visual communications like Pinterest and Instagram. Right now, they almost don't have any traffic to Kickstarter. So I know some people who said they had successful campaigns on Pinterest, but I think you always have to learn about your potential customers, because of course Kickstarter has so many different categories. And if you are doing technology project, it's completely different than you are doing a project like kids books. So you're going to have completely different target group. And this target group is going to be on different social media. So first you need to understand who are you going to approach, and then based on that, you can decide which channels to use to approach them.
Crowdster is the first big data-driven app that uses information that we have collected from way over 600,000 campaigns to find out what works and what doesn't work. So, there are things like the campaign optimizer that will tell you whether or not your title is too long or too short, your description, if you should add some images. We now have a press release distribution service. You can submit your crowdfunding press release to over 100 news sites and business blogs. We have a media list download service with over 23,000 journalists and bloggers in 170 crowdfunding categories. Then we also have a crowd builder, which is one of my favorites. So we have over 500,000 users in the database that have previously supported crowdfunding campaigns, and you can go in there, say select from a drop-down menu that I'm in film and video, or I'm wearable technology, and then it will return thousands and thousands of users that you can connect with on Twitter and on Facebook to build your audience.
For companies that are looking to raise capital, I would say, first and foremost, before you go to the markets, whether it's donation or reward or equity-based, you really have to make sure, Google's the first line of due diligence, right? Like the first thing somebody does before they invest or buys your product is they'll go and they'll Google you after looking at your campaign and find out who you are. And so anybody can set a Google result in their calendar, using Google Alerts. Set that Google Alert on a daily basis, monitor that, use that as a media list building tool for you. And then as you see trends happening in the market, go and offer yourself as an expert to journalists, to bloggers, other people in your industry to comment on those particular trends, and start doing this, ideally 4 to 6 months before you do any sort of public effort, so you can build your presence out there in the marketplace and really develop the story of expertise, right? Expertise sells. Like what sells people is you being a leader, you knowing what you're doing in your industry and having some sort of expertise and knowledge and things like that, and media attention, and that just kind of validates your expertise there. It gives you a chance to to get up on a soapbox and talk about who you are and what you know. So definitely start building that story and make sure that your messaging speaks to your strategic goals and what you can actually do and accomplish. Your company message and your bio are two of the most important pieces of content you have on your site when you're crowdfunding, because you need to build the story of why you have the experience to do what you say you're going to do, whether that's a donation reward or whether that's equity based. You've got to tell people how you're going to get from point A to point B once you have their money.
There are really two tips I want to give to you that are kind of what I've identified over the years that I've been working with people doing crowdfunding. The two keys to success are, first, to use a very personal approach. I often see people put up a crowdfunding page, post about it twice on Facebook, and then complain that no one gave to their campaign. That just isn't how crowdfunding works. You have to, after you set up the page, you've got to reach out to everyone in your personal network. And when I say everyone, the closest 150 people to you need to have a personal, individualized invitation to contribute to your campaign. So whether that's email, a phone call, or a lunch meeting, you've got to work it just like the olden days, right? It's person-to-person kind of work. It isn't magic. It isn't some magic well of money. There aren't people standing at the doors at Kickstarter waiting for something to be posted so they can contribute to the campaign. No, you got to go find the people. So that's thing one. Thing two is then you've got to go out and get the media to pay attention to what you're doing. You've got to pitch every blogger. You've got to pitch Joy and Greg to be on their show. You've got to pitch everybody so that you have an opportunity to get exposure. You know, your local newspaper, and don't be afraid to reach out to national media sources, whether it's Forbes or Huffington Post or even CNN. There are all kinds of ways that these channels are creating for people to connect with the author. So you go to the New York Times, for crying out loud. The New York Times, you read an article. On almost every article, there's a button to email the author. So go read an article, find a relevant article on the New York Times, and send an email pitch to the author. That's why that button is there. So get the media on your site.
When you think about it, crowdfunding is about making an emotional connection. And so the only way and the best way to make an emotional connection with people is to tell your story. That doesn't mean you have to be a great writer. That doesn't mean that you have to do, people think it's once upon a time when we talk about storytelling, but it's really about connecting on an emotional level with people. It's so important to get your strategy down pat before you click go, because the clock is ticking and it's kind of too late unless you get extremely lucky. Or unless you have this phenomenal innovation that people are just clamoring for. And frankly, that's not the majority of people, which is not to say that they don't have great ideas. They just need to figure out how to differentiate themselves. And they need to figure out how to differentiate themselves before they launch. The video, the pitch video, I read a statistic where we have an attention span and 1 second shorter than a goldfish, which is 9 seconds. And ours is 8 seconds. Okay, so you've got to really capture people, and the video is where it really, really happens, because it's a sort of a quid pro quo. Rewards have to be really well thought out, and you can't just go. Some of the things that worked early on in the space aren't working as well, and so you have to really, really get creative and spend time and think about what can you offer people. If it's a product, it's pretty clear. But if it's not a straight up product, what can you offer people that's going to be of value? So the perks really figure prominently.